Hello and welcome to this very special Monday edition of the PipeBomb Wrestling Podcast, the show that is for the fans, by the fans. I am your phenomenal host, Mr. Podcasting, Chris Belcher. You can follow me at Chris Belcher24 on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The show is at PBW Podcast on all of those platforms. Our shows are available for you wherever you find your podcast. If you want your audio versions, that's available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. You can also listen to us every Monday and Wednesday on SportsWire Radio. That's sportnarium.com/player. We premiere new episodes there. Those are the audio versions, but our video shows are exclusive to bodyslam.net's YouTube channel. So make sure that you hit that subscribe button there. That way you can see our smiling faces doing this wonderful show. Once again, my name is Chris Belcher. Thank you for joining us this week. And we have really been on the interview train recently. A couple of weeks ago, we interviewed Hunter Knott and Rosario Grillo, the hottest, fastest rising tag team in the industry, better known as TSF, straight out of the Nightmare Factory. Those guys are a blast. Last Flashback Friday episode, we posted myself and my brother from another mother, Jared Justice. We interviewed the Blue Chip, Bo Tavian, a fantastic independent wrestler out of the state of Florida. So we're going to continue the interview train. Shout out to our boy from bodyslam.net, Cassidy Haynes, for this hookup. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in the presence of an independent wrestling legend, a man who has traveled the globe. He has done all sorts of things. We could not be happier to have him on the show. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Jimmy Rave. Ladies and gentlemen, Jimmy, how are we today?
I'm doing okay today. How are you?
Man, I am doing great. It's great to have you on the podcast. I know that we've had some scheduling going back and forth, but I'm glad we got something nailed down. I'm excited for our fans to hear your story.
Awesome. I'm excited to be here.
Man, that's awesome. Before we talk about your story and before we talk about the present day, let's look back at your career in wrestling. And what we're going to do is we're going to start with the question that we always ask all of our special guests on here, because we want our fans to know that we don't bring just anybody on here. We bring wrestling fans. This podcast is for the fans, by the fans. We're just, at the end of the day, no matter what title you give any of us, we're just wrestling fans talking about wrestling. So tell us, Jimmy, about your beginning days of your wrestling fandom. How did you discover the business? What are some of your earliest memories of watching the business, and who were some of your favorites to check out?
Yeah, so I was a military kid, so I moved around a lot in my life, and I was living in Hawaii at a real early age, and I remember I had this one friend, and we used to go and hang out at his house, and he had all these like wrestling figures, and I had no clue what pro wrestling was at that time. I might have been in like kindergarten or first grade or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But he had this big party at his house for his birthday, and we watched WrestleMania 3.
Oh, wow.
And I was hooked after that. And so living in Hawaii, they didn't do very many shows in Hawaii, but every year they came around my birthday, which is early December, to do house shows. And so that was my birthday present, every year,
Gotcha.
And I can tell you about the worst finish I've ever seen in wrestling, if you want to hear that story.
Sure, yeah.
But it happened at one of these shows. So they had billed the big match between Hogan and Sergeant Slaughter while he was being an Iraqi sympathizer.
Okay.
And even though I lived in Hawaii, I was born and raised in Cobb County, Georgia, in Marietta. I went to the same high school as Xavier Woods and Buff Bagwell, and we were rivals with the school that Cody Rhodes went to. But I was from Cobb County, Georgia, and so they announced that Hogan couldn't be there at the show, and he had missed his flight or something, and they put Big Boss Man in the main event against Sergeant Slaughter.
Okay.
So I was going crazy. and me and my friends are watching this match, and then things are going back and forth. Slot And then Big Boss Man gets on the top rope. There's some back and forth with him and Sergeant Slaughter, and he comes off with a double axe handle and covers Slaughter, and then the bell rings, and we're
Yeah.
going nuts. Like, we just saw a big title change, blah 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 blah. But really, what happened is Big Boss Man got DQ'd for being on the top rope for more than 5 seconds.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
And I've been in wrestling, for 22 years now, and I have not seen that finish ever.
Wow.
I don't even
Oh
think
my
they count it
gosh.
now.
No, like the closest that I can remember to anything like that, I think when Bill Watts came into WCW around 92, 93 or whatever, that's when they started instituting the throw you over the top rope, you're automatically disqualified kind of thing. So that makes me think of that. It's like a Bill Watts rule. My goodness, that's crazy.
Right.
So this the Big Boss Man and Hogan, that kind of thing, that was probably what, 90, is that around 92-ish? 91, 92-ish? Okay.
Yeah, 90,
so
90, 91, yeah.
Okay. So, and you were how old at the time when you went to that show?
I don't know, maybe 7 or 8, I don't know.
7 or 8. Okay. So you got into the wrestling business, correct me if I'm wrong, 1999 is about the time you debuted. Is that about right?
Yeah, that's when I debuted. I had started when I was 14, like going around training, setting up the rings and stuff like that.
Gotcha. Okay.
But
was that
by
around?
then I had moved back to Marietta,
okay,
Georgia, and I kid you not, this is in the heyday where WCW's around. This is like 98.
Yeah. Okay.
97, 98. And I go to baseball practice one day and I see Dusty Rhodes there, and I freak out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
And then where we lived, in Marietta, like you saw wrestlers all the time. It wasn't even, like because WCW was around.
Yeah.
So yeah, at that point, things started getting full swing for me, and then there was a independent show at my high school, and then that's kind of where everything really started for me, and
Sure.
I started looking up how to get into the business, and then one thing led to another, and I started training.
That's awesome. So did you ever have a plan B of something else that you think you might have done had you not wrestled, or something that you maybe chose between or chose wrestling over?
Yeah, I was supposed like baseball was going to be my meal ticket, like
Gotcha.
I was heavily looked at for baseball, and but then I did a lot of tournaments and stuff like that, and then I remember being at one tournament, and there was this kid that was like really really good from our area, and I remember like his team didn't do so well in the tournament, and so the scouts like just kind of didn't review him that time, and I was at that point I'd already been training and wrestling, and I felt like baseball you kind of need a whole team to kind of lift you up to be able to do well,
Right.
but in pro wrestling it's all about me. Like if I don't do well, I can be the one that says this was my fault that it didn't succeed.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, that's a lot of pressure on yourself too, but at the same time, that makes you feel better when you do succeed. That
Absolutely.
that you didn't have to depend on somebody else to do it for you or what have you. So that's a great mindset to have, and that took you all
Yes,
around.
absolutely. Like it's all on my back.
Absolutely. I mean, it took you all around the world. That mindset did. For those of you who were listening that might not be familiar with Jimmy's work, I mean, Jimmy, you wrestled in Ring of Honor, you wrestled in CZW, TNA, NWA Wildside. competed in Best of the Super Juniors for New Japan in 2008, Dragon Gate. I mean, the list goes on and on, man. You have had an incredible journey in the wrestling business. As you look back on your career as a whole, like, what are some of your, are there moments, memories, specific matches that really stick out above the others for you?
Oh yeah, yeah. I have, like a lot of people ask me like what's the one match in my career that I is my favorite? And that's so hard to pinpoint because I I I like different matches for different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Like in Ring of Honor, like my match with CM Punk when we did the steel cage match and he superplexed me off the steel cage, like that was a big one for me.
Sure.
Um, me and Nigel McGuinness and doing the Fight Without Honor in Liverpool, England. That was a big one for me. I had a really good match with Brian Danielson on the fourth anniversary show for Ring of Honor, so that was a big deal for me. And then when I got when I left Ring of Honor and I got back on the independence, there's a company called Atlanta Wrestling Entertainment, and I was their champion for about 18 months. But I wrestled the who's who of independent wrestling, or right now it's the who's who of NXT or whatever. But like I wrestled
Right.
Johnny Gargano, Tommaso Ciampa, uh, Cedric Alexander, Sammy Callahan, like the who's who,
Yeah.
and still had really good matches, and
Yeah.
so I'm proud of those for other reasons.
Absolutely. I mean, it's it's almost like, I don't know, if somebody asks you like what your favorite band is or your favorite song or whatever. And for me, like when I'm a musician, so when people ask me that question, I'm like, well, man, it just depends on the day. It depends on what kind of
Yeah,
mood I'm in. So I can definitely see from that perspective, you can talk about Punk, you can talk about Brian Danielson, you talk about Gargano. I mean, the list goes on and on. Like you said, you've wrestled the who's who. It's just a matter of, what kind of sparks you as far as your mood and what you look back on more fondly, maybe that day versus a different day. Of all those guys that you just mentioned, um, who's probably your favorite to get in the ring with, or is that just kind of just depends on the day?
man, that just depends on the day. Like some of those names that I wrestled, like Punk or Brian Danielson, like of course you're gonna always have good matches with them. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
but I enjoy developing talent. There's a lot of talent that I wrestled on their way up or have had a hand in developing them, and so those mean a lot to me. Like, I only wrestled Johnny Gargano twice, but like both of our matches were pretty flawless,
sure.
and I just enjoyed, like, the first time I wrestled him was in 2012 for Dragon Gate USA.
Hmm.
Somebody got hurt, and then I wrestled him on an opening match of the pay per view, um, and it was really good.
Wow.
I also had a hand in developing Davey Richards in Ring of Honor.
Mm,
Um, so I was his like first 5 matches in Ring of Honor, and so I have a lot of love for those matches too.
sure.
But like, there's
Absolutely.
so many guys, like even now though, like when I was winding things down in my career, like there's so many guys that are so good. It's so hard to pick just one now.
Sure. And they're all good for different reasons, like you were mentioning earlier. A lot of those matches that you mentioned, give our fans, are they on YouTube, or are there other places that they might be able to find that stuff?
Yeah, I know some of my Johnny Gargano. One of my Johnny Gargano matches is on YouTube. Um, like I have matches with me and AR Fox, me and Sammy Callahan. Yeah, there's a good. If you start digging on YouTube, you can find a lot of good stuff.
Good. That's awesome. We'll make sure to put that link on with this interview as well. That makes sure people can go check out some of those matches. One in particular that I want to ask you about that you didn't
Sounds
mention
good.
is from Ring of Honor, and I didn't get the year on this storyline, but there was a match that you had with AJ Styles I want to ask you about. Part of it seemed like in my research that part of the story was that you were stealing other people's finishing moves and using them as your own. And there was
Yeah,
a match with you and AJ where you lost and you could not use the move known as the Styles Clash anymore. So I'm just curious as to where did that storyline come from?
that was the Gabe Sapolsky storyline, mixed in with some stuff that, like, that was the, um, like, booking wise, like, that was the great thing about Gabe is he was somebody that would collaborate with talent, and so that was a collaboration with us. But what really happened was the RF Rob Feinstein scandal happened, and
Yeah.
I was already turning heel, so AJ was not allowed to wrestle at Ring of Honor anymore because TNA pulled their talent, and I stole it while he was away. And like there was always this hope that he would come back, and then when he came back, like 6 months later, I already had a story to go through.
Yeah.
But
That
yeah, like I stole the Styles Clash, and then he beat me for that, and then I started doing greetings for Ghana, and that's a pedigree.
yeah.
And that was just listening to the crowd. They were not into Triple H at the time, and then
Right.
I was like, oh well, I got a new move.
Oh, that's hilarious. So yeah, that's really interesting how that perfect storm happened. Some things in wrestling they just write themselves, and it sounds like that story with AJ, it all really fell into place at the right time when he had to go away, and you were able to get that heat, and then he could come back and get it back from you.
Yeah, absolutely. I wrote TV in Atlanta and Georgia for about 3 years for a company called Rampage Pro Wrestling,
Okay.
and I learned as a booker that um, somebody no showing me or canceling or whatever, um, where I would see it as super detrimental to the show. I learned that it could be sometimes the best thing to happen.
Yeah.
Same thing with WWE or AEW. Sometimes somebody being hurt or not able to wrestle the scheduled match that they have
yeah.
sometimes creates a whole new thing that could be better than what you
Sure.
originally had.
Absolutely. I mean, I think back to the most recent thing that I can think of for that is Mustafa Ali getting hurt. Insert Kofi Kingston, and you get Kofimania at WrestleMania 35. Uh,
There you go.
that typically doesn't happen. That's not going to happen if Mustafa Ali doesn't get hurt. You know what I mean? It's terrible
Absolutely.
that Ali got hurt, but I was in the crowd at WrestleMania 35, and it was just an incredible moment to have Kofi finally win the championship. The run may or may not have gone as people expected it to, but it was all about that WrestleMania moment. Going back to your
Absolutely.
days as a booker, what do you have a favorite storyline or a favorite match that you put together as your time as a booker?
Yeah. So when I started booking, but the thing that was happening in Georgia was like a little shift in things going from that old school mentality
Mm-hmm.
to I wanted to update it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I was just because when I became booker, I was still wrestling other places like Ring of Honor. I went to India for a month. To do that Ring to King stuff. But so um, before the people that were booking before me was he just passed away. His name's Jody Hamilton. He wrestled as the assassin.
Yeah.
He was booking before me. Him and Nick Patrick were booking. That's his son.
Oh
um
wow. You know what? I think I've heard that somewhere before, but I don't think I put those two together. That's awesome.
Yeah. So one day they came up to me and my friend Sauronaro, who was, a Ring of Honor tag champion, and they say, "Look, we're gonna book the angles, and we want you guys to book the finishes of the matches. Like
Oh
we'll tell
wow.
you how long we tell you how long they want them to go, and then you guys figure out the finish. And so like I was already doing that for about 6 months. Then they had a falling out with the guy that owned the company, and then the wrestlers voted me in as the new booker.
Wow.
But before that, I had pitched an angle to Jody Hamilton where this guy named Kyle Matthews, who's like extremely amazing wrestler. Like
Mm-hmm.
they had nothing for him; they were just beating him every week. And I was like, "Well, can he be like my second, like my young boy? You know what I mean? Like they do
Yeah.
in Japan."
Yeah.
And he did that for a while, and I told Kyle, like, when we did this, I was like, listen, this storyline that I have for you and I is gonna go for 2 years, and basically what happened was I finally turned on him, and then we had this 2 years long of he couldn't make me submit or pin me for 2 years,
Mm-hmm.
and then finally he won the title, and then I was his first. That was another thing is like in my booking, he wasn't supposed to win the title, but
Right.
somebody like no showed, and I had to do it, and then I was his
Mm-hmm.
first title defense, and it just worked out like that, and then he beat me
Yeah.
his first title defense. It was huge, and like um, Bill Barons, who's my agent and AJ Styles' agent,
Mm-hmm.
who owned NWA Wildside, he and I would collaborate on some of the booking, and he was very old school booking, and told me that this wouldn't work. Even though those old school guys would do long angles, like
Mm-hmm.
he just kept telling me, like, I don't think the crowd will, sit for 2 years and enjoy this. But, in the twists and turns we did of the angle, like it worked out. And
Sure.
then when he finally beat me, the place went nuts.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's I mean, you talk about, having the crowd be patient and wait for it and wait for it, wait for it. You got to know when to pull the trigger. And then, like you said, happy accident. It happened to be time to pull the trigger. Maybe you weren't ready to do it, but it happened and it all worked out. So
Yeah.
that that's
Yeah.
again, like we said, that's some of the best angles in wrestling that just kind of happen.
Yeah. I listened to Bruce Pritchard and Conrad Thompson talk about one of their, I think it was their first or second podcast they did
Mm-hmm.
together. They talked about the angle with Hogan and Savage,
Yes.
and and just how that had been booked. You know what I mean? Like a year
Yep.
before, and like it
Mm-hmm.
just worked out, and like I like that stuff, and
Yeah.
like one of the things I like uh in pro wrestling is like something a lot of other guys don't like. I like the challenge. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
for example, I've been a heel since like 2003,
Mm-hmm.
and I had gotten in my groove of what a heel should be.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, man, I don't want to keep doing this kind of heel work. And then I started trying to be a heel that never cheated, and like at all companies, and it still worked. Like based on
Yeah.
my mannerisms and how aggressive I was wrestling,
Sure.
people still reacted to it. And I think creating those challenges for yourself is super helpful and healthy for you. I
Yeah.
remember Brian Danielson and I were flying back from Germany right after I got fired from TNA,
Mm-hmm.
and Brian was talking about moving to Thailand to do like a Muay Thai or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, why would you want to do that, man? He was like, well, I grew up like playing soccer and you know these other things, but like that's competitive, you know,
Yeah,
and he goes like what we do is like not always competitive, and I still have that drive to be competitive, you know,
sure.
and you know, so you know, so like that's how I compete competed with myself was okay, like, you know, try to get this reaction from people.
Yeah.
I would always, you know, I would just do little things. Like I did, we were trying to, turn this guy babyface, but it was real hard with the crowd. And, so I did 3 60-minute matches in a row, like 3 weekends in a row.
Hmm.
And that'll kill you sometimes, but,
Sure it will.
um, the final match, my challenge for myself was I entered the match as the heel, the villain, and I wanted to switch to being the baby face by the end of the match, and then him being the
Oh wow.
heel. And we were able to do that perfectly. And you know, so like there's little things that you can do, you know,
Yep.
to make things exciting. I was talking about this with somebody Chris Jericho the other day. He and I were talking about how some people can be good wrestlers, but not have the mind for wrestling.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just like, um, it's just like, yeah, I hate comparing things to musicians all the time, but I'm a
Hmm.
musician, so that's what I do. It's like anybody can go in and play a drum solo, or anybody can go in and play the shredding guitar solo, or what have you. But it takes a special kind of person to really sit in the pocket and play for the song and make it feel good versus just like with wrestling, just do all the moves, do all
Hmm.
kinds of high spots or whatever. But a guy that can tell a story or a guy that can reel the crowd in, like you just said, switch from heel to baby in the middle of a match and it worked flawlessly. So I mean, it takes a special kind of person to do that. So kudos for that. That makes a lot of sense, man.
I got a
Um,
question about the music thing though.
yeah.
Would you compare that to like people that can play music and to the people that can create music?
As far as like producers and stuff like that go,
Yeah, so like you know, like in music, like I can give you a sheet of music and you play
yeah,
it. You know what I mean? But
yeah.
for you to be able to, you know, create that sheet of music is a different thing. You know what I mean?
Right. I think that yes, I think you're right. I think some people are gifted as far as writing goes. I'm not a writer myself. If you give me
Right.
an idea, I can build on it, but I don't necessarily create things from scratch. So I think to that point, I think there are people who can add to, but not necessarily
Mm-hmm.
create. So I liken that
Absolutely.
to if you're talking about wrestling. You mentioned Bruce Pritchard and Conrad Thompson earlier. I'm a avid listener of their podcast. There was one show they were talking a while, it was a long while back. They were talking about Ted DiBiase because they did a short run with Ted as a producer in I think the early 2000s. I could have my dates wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Ruthless aggression era type thing. But Bruce was saying that Ted wasn't a great producer. Ted had great ideas and he could absolutely add to things. And if you give him somewhere to start, then he could, be great at it. But as far as building it from the ground up, that wasn't his forte.
Right.
So I think that's where that comparison would be as far as
Gotcha.
creator versus player. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
All right. So if you are just now joining us, this is the PipeBomb Wrestling Podcast. This is the show that is for the fans, by the fans. I am your host, Chris Belcher. You can follow me at Chris Belcher24. The show is at PBW Podcast on all the social media platforms. Make sure you're tuning in every Monday and Wednesday for brand new episodes on bodyslam.net's YouTube channel, sportnarium.com/player, and wherever you find your podcast. The PipeBomb Wrestling Podcast is everywhere, ladies and gentlemen. And we are joined today by a very well-traveled veteran of the wrestling business. We're talking to Jimmy Rave here, and we've been reminiscent about Jimmy's career, some booking, some of the opponents that he's faced, If you haven't checked out his stuff, make sure you do a deep dive on YouTube. You will be highly entertained. I can promise you that. But Jimmy, let's get to more of the current situation. Let's talk about some more pressing issues. Back last year, according to my research, you had an infection in your arm that resulted in amputation, ultimately your retirement from wrestling. And then back in October of this year, you had another infection where you had to have both legs amputated. First
Yeah,
of
that
all,
was in June.
June. Okay, so the research that I said that I had was October. So you had it back in June. Okay, so a couple months earlier.
Hmm.
First of all, that's a tough situation for anybody to have to go through, much less somebody that makes a living using his body the way that that you did. So obviously, our heartfelt sympathy and empathy goes out to you for that tough situation that you're in. Secondly, as best you can describe the process as to what happened, was it something you knew right away as far as the arm and the legs? Was it something that just developed over time? In your best way, as much as you're comfortable sharing, tell us kind of how that went down.
Yeah, so my the stuff happened with my arm in November of 2020. Um, so what happened was is like maybe 2 or 3 months before that, I was working in the yard and I got a scrape in my arm, and I just put Neosporin on it and went about my way.
Sure,
And then
absolutely.
over the next couple months, it would hurt like really bad, and then the next day not hurt at all. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So I just kept applying Neosporin. But then like my hands started getting weaker, and finally I went in, and they were like, "Man, you have MRSA, and like it's eating away your arms, becoming septic." And so I was like, "Okay, well, what does that mean?" And they're like, "Well, we're gonna have to amputate your arm
my
uh,
gosh.
from above the elbow down." And like that was just a life changing experience there. You know what I mean? Like
Sure,
learning how to like just live life without your one of your limbs is difficult.
sure.
Um, and we were told the insurance wouldn't pay for a prosthetic, and not only that, but then like I was running a training facility at the time for pro wrestling and helping people you know do pro wrestling all over, right?
Hmm.
Doing producing and stuff like that. All that kind of halted, like while I was trying to wrap my head around all that. I mean, I got really depressed, to be honest. Like, it was just
Sure.
super depressing. Like, I didn't leave my house for months. And then in February of 2021, one of my students, I had just been talking to him, and he jumped in front of a train, and that was, it killed me. Like, going to his
Sure.
funeral and everything
Yeah.
just devastated me. Um, then I still wasn't like going out, you know what I mean? And I was just, trying to figure out like what I want to do with life. And then um I would say like in like early part of May, like I was having trouble walking, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
uh and then it was the same kind of thing. Just like some days it would be all right, so other days, like I couldn't get out of bed.
Yeah.
And then so finally in June I went and to the ER, and they were like, "Dude, you have MRSA in both your legs." And I was like, "Okay, so what does that mean?" And then they were like, we're gonna have to, we're definitely gonna have to take your right leg, but your left leg we may be able to save, but maybe 6 months from now we'll have to amputate it too."
Wow.
And I was like, well, why would I wait 6 months? You know what I mean? Like, why can't we just do it now? You know?
Sure.
Because if I'm going to be in a ton of pain, I'd rather just get it all done and over with.
Sure. Makes total sense.
But they were wanting to do like a wound vac on me or something like that, and
Mm-hmm.
um, but they were just like, it's probably not going to work, you know. And then I would have had to be in a nursing home for that 6 months.
Wow.
Um, so I was like, all right, well, you know, you guys do what you got to do, and the same surgeon that did my arm did my legs, and like just waking up from that was like, you know, I thought I was depressed before. You know what I'm saying? Like, uh,
Sure.
like being a triple amputee is like super difficult.
Absolutely.
Um,
I can.
like just getting in and out of bed, like getting in and out of a chair, just super difficult.
Sure.
And then uh so yeah, so and then I don't know, after maybe 2 weeks in the hospital, they sent me to a physical rehabilitation place,
Mm-hmm.
and I was there for like 3 weeks,
Mm-hmm.
getting everything, like trying to learn how to uh move without, two legs, and
Right.
try to get my core strength up and all that stuff. But you know, and then they gave me a wheelchair, which is super difficult to drive with one arm. You know what I mean?
Sure. Absolutely. Man, that's. I mean, what a terrible situation. Again, it just. It seems like it was one thing after another, and I know that I've seen an outpouring of support from
Yeah.
fans and other wrestlers online, and things like that. But what in such an awful situation? I always try to be a glass half full kind of guy. What positives have you been able to pull from such a terrible situation?
Um. Yeah. So like it's really nice to see people write nice things about me, and how an interaction with me affected them. Because when I was a heel, especially in Ring of Honor, when I was a heel inside and outside the ring.
Sure, yeah,
So I didn't believe in selling merch as a heel, all that kind of stuff.
right, right,
So
right.
I didn't have a lot of fan interaction, and so people talking about how just watching me wrestle affected them. That's been amazing. And then the outpouring of other amputees has been, and awesome too. Like
Yeah,
just telling me that, hey, you can get through this type stuff, and then just hearing their stories. Like I heard, one person was like, I got a spider bite, and then they had to take my arm. You know, this one lady said she was going through chemo and got MRSA. Like, so you're doing something to save your life, and then
right.
another infection comes and is like, no, fuck you,
Wow.
that type. You know what I'm saying? Like that
Yeah,
kind of,
yeah,
you know, and you know, um, I'm trying to be supportive of them and my stuff too.
sure.
So it's just, and I don't know if you saw the medical bill that I posted.
Yes. Yep.
Like $103,000
Yep.
is a lot of money, you know what I mean? And like
Yep.
that was just for that physical rehabilitation place
Yeah.
that I stayed at. And I just was at my doctor Thursday, and he was like, okay, we're, like, if you get prosthetics for your legs, you're gonna have to come in and stay another 3 weeks to learn how to do that.
Yeah.
So like that that bill is gonna come to me again.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yep. Yep.
uh,
No, I totally get it, man. And like I said earlier, it just feels like it's one thing on top of the other. But again, the outpouring, it's awesome that you were able to share with other amputees and be able to relate to them in the best way possible, and to
Hmm.
share ways that they've been able to handle their situation. You mentioned the medical bill, and obviously I want to give you the platform to let everybody know. Obviously, there's been a GoFundMe set up for you. A lot of people are, showing support online. The Pipe Bomb Wrestling Podcast has thrown their support your way as well. So for those of you who feel led, now we're not, this is not a collection piece. This is not, we're not asking you to, to shell out everything. But if you feel led to donate, Jimmy would greatly appreciate it. Jimmy, tell everybody where they can donate, how they can get a hold of you, and what those avenues are.
Yes, sir. So my students were very thoughtful and made a GoFundMe for me, and it's GoFundMe.com /F /Jimmy Rave. Then
Okay.
I can take donations through PayPal, which is James M. Guffey, GUFFEY, @gmail.com. And I also have Cash App, and that's just the $ Jimmy Rave. All that stuff is on my Twitter, which is the Jimmy Rave. If
Yep.
you want to double check all that stuff.
Yep, absolutely. So hop on Jimmy's Twitter at the Jimmy Rave. We flashed that up on the screen if you're watching on bodyslam.net a couple times. We've also flashed up the PayPal email and the Cash App. So make sure that you, if you feel led to, I'll get that out in a minute. Make sure you head on over. You throw Jimmy your support. I know he would greatly appreciate it, and he would. I know that he will. Reach back out to you and just thank you for your support, because it's not something that people
Absolutely.
have to do, but it's people that are showing their love and support for, like you mentioned earlier, just the things that you have done in the wrestling business and how you've affected people's lives. It's just a matter of giving back. So if you guys feel led to do that, please make sure that you do that. I know that Jimmy would really appreciate it. We're going to get ready to
Yeah,
sign off here. Yeah, go ahead.
can I tell a real quick story?
Absolutely, man. Fire away.
So, we're talking about like people that have reached out to me. I got a email from or a DM from a very um, top guy at AEW, a top heel at AEW. I don't want to like blow up his spot,
Sure.
but he and I had never wrestled each other, had never like really interacted. We were on a few shows together in Germany, um, and he reached out to me, and like he was like one of the first people to reach out, and I just thought that was like super awesome. Like people don't have to do that. Like
Yep.
I'm like that guy. You know what I mean? There's a lot of wrestlers you can ask that I've never met them, but I'm a fan of their work.
Yeah.
And like if they're wanting advice, like we keep in contact. But this business has been, especially when I first got into it. Like I said, I was in the wild west of pro wrestling when I first got into it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and nowadays it's a lot more loving than not so much. So I'm very much the kind of person that wants to reach out and be like, hey man, like I see what you're doing, keep up the good work.
Yeah.
If you ever need anything, let me know. And you know I hope more people are doing that.
Yep. That's awesome. And like you said, the wrestling business is changing. But it's great that in a time that was considered the wild west, you made an impact on these people, and they're showing their love right back to you. So I know that, like I said, I know Jimmy would appreciate if you guys hop on and donate. I've got those things on the screen if you're watching on bodyslam.net. Again, if you're not though, PayPal at it's James M. Guffey at gmail.com. Cash App is the cash sign Jimmy Rave. And then the GoFundMe is gofundme.com /F /Jimmy Rave. All those things will be on Jimmy's Twitter at the Jimmy Rave. We're going to get ready to sign off on here. Again, make sure you follow Jimmy at the Jimmy Rave on Twitter. Make sure you follow the Pipe Bomb Wrestling Podcast at PBW Podcast wherever your social media platform of choice. And you can find our shows every Monday and Wednesday, brand new, as well as our archives on bodyslam.net's YouTube channel. Jimmy, man, thanks so much for hopping on and telling your story and sharing stories of your career. Man, it was a blast. I'm glad we could finally get this nailed down and get you on here.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely, man. Thank you so much for checking out the Pipe Bomb Wrestling Podcast. Make sure you go follow Jimmy. Make sure you follow me. I'm at Chris Belcher 24. And make sure you follow the show at PBW Podcast. This has been the Monday edition of the Pipe Bomb Wrestling Podcast, and we will catch you guys down the road.